7 children and the Alps, supposedly. Beautiful music, gorgeous.
What if the most iconic love scene in film history was a total lie? In The Sound of Music, Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer share a tender moment in a softly lit gazebo, whispering heartfelt lines before leaning in for the perfect kiss. But here's the truth. They weren't crying from emotion. They were crying from laughter. Behind that dreamy glow, a set ruined by a ridiculous noise. Over and over every time they tried to kiss, a loud raspberry sound blared from the studio lights. Flatulent, awkward, and completely uncontrollable. They tried again and again. 20 takes, ruined. It got so bad that director Robert Wise had to scrap the entire setup. He ordered the crew to shoot it in silhouette just to hide the laughter on their faces. And for 30 years, no one said a word. The studio demanded silence. Even Plummer, who hated the film, kept his mouth shut. So why hide something so innocent? Because the truth didn't match the myth. And The Sound of Music was never about truth. It was about illusion. But that wasn't the only secret buried beneath those hills. Before it became a classic, The Sound of Music was a joke in Hollywood. In 1956, a German producer released 2 small films based on Maria von Trapp's memoir. They were quiet hits in post-war Europe, especially in West Germany. But in America, studios laughed them off. Clumsy, outdated, sentimental fluff. Then something strange happened. Paramount sent Broadway director Vincent J. Donahue to Europe to scout material. He saw the films and agreed. They weren't great, but the story moved him. It felt sincere. So instead of recommending it as a movie, he pitched a wild idea. You can't film this, you have to turn it into a Broadway musical. That moment changed everything. Back in the US, Mary Martin, the biggest Broadway star of the time, and her husband, Richard Halliday, were trying to contact Maria von Trapp to buy the rights for a stage adaptation. But Maria was off doing missionary work in Papua New Guinea. No phones, no agents, no interest in Broadway. Every time she received a letter, she tore it up, until fate intervened. When she returned to the US, Halliday was waiting in San Francisco with front-row tickets to Annie Get Your Gun. Maria finally relented and met with Mary Martin. She liked her, but there was a problem. Maria had already sold the film rights to the Germans for just $9,000. That's about $104,000 today. And it meant she had no control left. But she said something prophetic. You're welcome to give it your best shot. That shot would soon become a global phenomenon. The plan was simple. Use traditional Austrian folk songs and sprinkle in a few new ones. Safe, respectful, traditional. But Rodgers and Hammerstein weren't interested in being polite. When producers asked them for just one original song, they pushed back, hard. Their Broadway style didn't blend with old European melodies, and they refused to compromise. Their ultimatum? Let us write the entire score, or we walk. The producers hesitated, but they agreed. And then everything changed. Rodgers and Hammerstein delayed the project until they finished Flower Drum Song, but when they finally got to work on The Sound of Music, they turned it into something electric. On opening night, November 16, 1959, the audience was already hooked. It cost $400,000 to produce, but advance ticket sales hit an unheard of $232 million. Mary Martin only missed a single show in the entire 1,443 performance run, and Hollywood suddenly wanted in. By June 1960, a massive bidding war erupted for the film rights. 20th Century Fox won, shelling out $1.25 million, over $13 million today. That was a jaw-dropping figure for a lighthearted musical, but Fox was desperate. The studio was bleeding from the financial disaster that was Cleopatra. They needed a miracle. They just didn't know their biggest mistake was still to come. Julie Andrews was heartbroken. After originating the role of Eliza in My Fair Lady on stage, she was passed over for the film. They gave the part to Audrey Hepburn. Hollywood told her she wasn't glamorous enough, not star material, but director Robert Wise saw something others didn't. He watched unfinished footage of Mary Poppins at Disney and immediately called the screenwriter. Sign her before someone else does. Julie Andrews agreed to a flat fee, $225,000. No royalties, no back-end deal, just a check. It became one of the worst financial decisions Fox ever made. Mary Martin, who had originated The Sound of Music on Broadway, walked away with over $8 million. Andrews, nothing beyond that single payment, no matter how many millions the film would earn. And it would earn hundreds of millions. Still, Andrews had her revenge. When she won the Oscar for Mary Poppins, she stepped up to the podium and thanked the man who rejected her, Mr. Jack Warner. But while the cameras loved her, her co-star was quietly spiraling. He called it The Sound of Mucus. Christopher Plummer didn't want the role. He thought Captain Von Trapp was stiff, boring, lifeless. He demanded rewrites, better lines, more depth, and a solo to show his character's soul. He was rejected, so he drank. Plummer later admitted that during some of the most emotional scenes, including the final family performance, he was drunk. "I hated the whole thing," he said. "The sugar, the sentiment." The Syrup director Robert Wise tried other actors, Sean Connery, Richard Burton, even Bing Crosby. None worked. In the end, he flew to London and begged Plummer to join. The actor agreed, but only if he could reshape the character. Even then, he hated every minute. He nicknamed it SNM, short for Sound of Mucus, and joked it felt like flogging a dead horse. He gained weight. He drank more. He was miserable in Salzburg, a place he once described as his personal prison of sentimentality. And yet, despite his contempt, he delivered one of the most memorable performances of his career. Because Plummer had one secret weapon, he was so good at pretending. Even when he didn't care, he made audiences believe he did. That powerful moment, Captain Von Trapp singing Edelweiss with tears in his eyes, still moves audiences to this day. But what most people don't realize? That voice? It wasn't Christopher Plummer. Sure, he nailed the entrances and exits, but the long, soaring notes, the emotional heart of the song, were dubbed by Disney's Bill Lee, a seasoned studio vocalist. Lee had ghost sung for years, and in this case, he blended so perfectly that no one ever suspected a thing. Plummer hated it. He felt stripped, silenced, humiliated. In his own memoir, he admitted that being replaced, without warning, made him feel like a fraud. And to make matters worse, no one even told the audience. Not in press releases, not in interviews, not for decades. It was another secret in a growing list of cover-ups, and Plummer wasn't the only one who suffered behind the curtain, because the youngest member of the cast almost didn't survive. 5-year-old Kim Karath played Gretel, the adorable pigtailed heart of the Von Trapp kids. She was too young to swim. Everyone knew that, but no one told Julie Andrews. During the famous rowboat scene, the plan was simple. When the boat flips, Andrews grabs little Gretel immediately. But the boat tipped harder than expected, and instead of falling toward the child, Andrews went the opposite direction. Kim went under. Not once, but twice. Crew members rushed in. One of the older kids dove into the lake to pull her out. She vomited lake water, cried uncontrollably, and developed a fear of swimming that lasted for years. Meanwhile, the cameras kept rolling, capturing chaos disguised as charm. And that was just one of the continuity nightmares the cast faced. Nicholas Hammond, who played Friedrich, hit a sudden growth spurt halfway through filming, jumping from 5 feet 3 inches to nearly 6 feet tall. Another child actor lost all her baby teeth. They had to be replaced with prosthetics mid-shoot. It was like trying to shoot a musical on a moving train. And the weather made everything worse. You know the one. The camera pans over the Austrian mountains. Julie Andrews spins in an open meadow, arms flung wide, as the music swells around her. It looks peaceful, joyous, iconic. But what really happened that day? A helicopter hovered just a few feet above her head. The cameraman, strapped dangerously to the side, shouted for her to keep spinning. But every time the chopper passed, the wind from its blades slammed Andrews into the ground. Hard. She was knocked down 6 or 7 times, face first into the dirt, grass, and mud, before the shot was finally usable. Her smile was real, but it masked pain. And that wasn't the only disaster Andrews faced. The producers hated how her hair looked on film. They sent her for subtle highlights. But something went horribly wrong. Her hair turned bright orange, like a traffic cone. Panicked, they chopped it shorter and dyed it a platinum blonde. The damage was done. Andrews later joked that it helped her feel more Austrian. But at the time, she was horrified. And still, the chaos wasn't over. Daniel Truhita, who played Rolf, the teenage telegram boy, wanted to look the part. So the studio bleached his hair. Aggressively. Too aggressively. The chemical treatment damaged his scalp. His hair never grew back properly. He was just 20 years old, but the result was permanent thinning. Years later, fans would ask why his hair looked so different. He'd just smile and say, "The blonde Nazi look came at a cost." Meanwhile, Andrews wasn't the only actor on edge. Every major outdoor scene was delayed by endless rain. According to cast and crew, 1964 brought the wettest spring Salzburg had seen in decades. Day after day, 250 people sat around watching the clouds and the budget darken. Fox had budgeted $8.2 million, but delays pushed it well past $10 million. The studio, already traumatized by the Cleopatra debacle, began to panic. Executives whispered, "What if this sweet little musical sinks the studio completely?" Things got so bad that they had to fake the sunshine. Massive arc lights were wheeled in to simulate clear skies, but the lights caused more problems. They overheated, they malfunctioned, and sometimes they made that infamous raspberry sound, the one that haunted the gazebo scene. Everything felt cursed, yet somehow it worked. Audiences never saw the chaos. They only saw the charm, the magic, the illusion. But the darkest twist was still to come. The movie ends in triumph. The Von Trapp family, hand in hand, hiking across the Alps to freedom as swelling music plays behind them. But that ending? It's pure fiction. In real life, there was no midnight escape, no secret path over the mountains. The family walked calmly to a train station and boarded a train out of Austria. That's it. No chase, no cliffs, no danger. Even worse, the mountains shown in the movie weren't even near the Swiss border. They were next to Hitler's private retreat, the Eagle's Nest. If the Von Trapps had hiked that direction, they'd have walked straight into Nazi command. But the lies didn't stop with the scenery. The love story between Maria and Captain Von Trapp? That too was sugar-coated. Maria was 22. Georg was 47, a 25-year age gap. She admitted she didn't love him, not at first. "I liked him," she wrote, "but I married him for the children." They wed in 1927, over a decade before the Nazis annexed Austria. The film changed it to 1938 to create false urgency. It repackaged a quiet marriage into a war-torn romance. And the children, even they were rewritten. The real Von Trapps had 10 kids. The film shows 7. Not only were 3 completely erased from the story, the rest had their names, personalities, and even ages changed. For example, Agathe, serious, bookish, and shy, became Liesel, the flirtatious teenager. When the real family saw it, they couldn't stop laughing. But Hollywood wasn't trying to be honest. They were trying to sell a fairy tale. For decades, audiences believed Edelweiss was a traditional Austrian folk song. Even US presidents quoted it at state dinners. But the truth? It was written in 1959 by 2 Americans, composer Richard Rodgers and lyricist Oscar Hammerstein II. It wasn't Austrian, it wasn't historical, it was showbiz. And it was Hammerstein's final song before he died of cancer. The deception worked so well that even locals were confused. But some weren't fooled, and they were furious. The Salzburg Marionette Theater refused to work with the film. When asked to provide puppets for the lonely goatherd scene, they declined with a sharp reply, "This is a classy operation. We don't want to be part of some tacky Hollywood movie." They weren't alone. Many Austrians were outraged by the film's portrayal of their country as an innocent victim of Nazi takeover. They felt the movie whitewashed Austria's role. It ignored the pre-Nazi dictatorship, the loss of democracy, and the truth about Austrian complicity. They weren't just victims, they were participants. And perhaps the most tragic omission of all, Maria von Trapp herself. The entire film is based on her 1949 memoir, but when she sold the rights to a German producer in the 1950s, she had no idea what she'd given away. When Hollywood came knocking, she had no say in casting, in script changes, or even how her own life was portrayed. She didn't earn a dime from the American film. Worse, when she asked to attend the 1965 premiere, the studio told her there were no seats left. Imagine that, watching the world fall in love with your life while being locked out of it. To this day, The Sound of Music remains one of the most beloved films of all time. Its songs are iconic, its romance unforgettable, its imagery timeless. But behind that magic lies something very different. A story of lies, manipulation, cover-ups, and corporate betrayal. From a fake escape across the Alps to a love story that was never romantic, From a child nearly drowning on set to a woman being erased from her own legacy, the truth behind The Sound of Music is messier, darker, and far more human than Hollywood ever let on. And yet, that's what makes it matter even more. Because in the end, The Sound of Music wasn't just a film, it was a machine. A glossy, glittering machine designed to sell comfort while hiding the cost. So next time you hear those hills come alive, remember, the real sound wasn't music, it was silence.